I grew up in San Francisco. My family wasn't just rich. We were the kind of rich that made people treat you differently. My parents, Vijay and Anuka, owned a successful chain of luxury eco-resorts that catered to high-end clients who wanted to save the planet in style. They were the type of people who thought networking was a competitive sport. Every dinner, every charity gala, every casual backyard barbecue somehow turned into a strategic meeting. Their biggest pride, besides their resorts, was the relationship they had with another powerful family who ran an event planning company. These families were like a perfect business partnership, feeding off each other's strengths. They planned the events, we hosted them. Our parents acted as if our bond was written in the stars. So when I started dating their daughter, Maya, my parents couldn't have been happier. In fact, happy doesn't even cover it. They were practically doing victory laps. I was 24 at the time, just starting to work in the family business, and Maya was 23, already deeply involved in managing parts of her parents' company. We met at one of those typical extravagant networking parties our families were known for, where everyone wore designer clothes and smiled too much. At first, Maya and I clicked because of how much we had in common. We both grew up with a sense of obligation, always aware that the family name came with expectations. We could joke about the absurdity of our lives, like how our parents scheduled family dinners 2 months in advance, or how we both had to learn the proper way to give a toast at age 10. I felt like we understood each other, and that was rare for me. By the time we officially started dating, our parents acted like it was the best thing that had ever happened. The next generation is taking over, my dad would say, as if our relationship was some kind of business milestone. Every family event became a photo opportunity for Arjun and Maya, the future. At first, I didn't mind. I was young, and the attention felt good in a way. But it wasn't long before cracks started to appear. Not in public, of course, but behind closed doors. Maya loved being in the spotlight. She was charming, polished, and could command a room like it was her stage. She loved being known as one half of the golden couple. For her, our relationship wasn't just about us. It was about the image, the brand, and how we looked to the world. If I ever wanted a quiet night at home, she'd guilt-trip me by saying, "We're supposed to be building something bigger here. People are watching us." My parents didn't help. They adored her. My mom called her the perfect daughter-in-law, which always made things awkward considering she wasn't even my fiancé. My dad, who was normally hard to impress, went out of his way to praise her. It wasn't just her charm, it was what she represented to them. Maya was a bridge between our families, solidifying a partnership that could last for generations. And that was the problem. Everyone saw our relationship as more than just a relationship. It was a business strategy. My parents would often make subtle comments about our future. "You two are unstoppable," my mom would say one night after dinner, as if congratulating us on a merger. "You'll take both families to new heights." I wanted to yell, "What if I don't want this? What if Maya isn't the one for me?" But I didn't. I kept my mouth shut because I knew how much this meant to them. Things only got worse over time. Maya and I started arguing more. She had this way of making me feel guilty for even thinking about pulling away. If I didn't want to go to some event with her, she'd say things like, "Do you even care about what we're building?" It wasn't about us anymore. It was about this image she had in her head of what we were supposed to be. Once, I suggested we take a step back from all the public appearances and focus on us. Her response? "We can't just disappear, Arjun. People expect to see us together. Do you know how bad it would look if we started pulling away now?" The worst part was how my parents acted as if Maya could do no wrong. Every time I expressed the slightest concern, they brushed it off. "You two are so good together," my mom would say, completely ignoring the point. My dad once told me, "You're lucky to have someone like Maya. Don't take her for granted." At first, I thought maybe I was the problem. Maybe I wasn't trying hard enough, or wasn't appreciating her enough. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. The truth was, we weren't compatible. We might have looked great on paper, but we really weren't good for each other. I started to feel like I was playing a role in someone else's movie. Every time we went to a party or a dinner, I'd put on my best smile and pretend everything was fine. But inside, I felt trapped. I'd look at all these people congratulating us on being perfect and wonder how many of them actually knew anything about our relationship. There was one night that really stuck with me. My parents had thrown this huge dinner party to celebrate some milestone at the resorts, and Maya and I were, of course, front and center. My dad made a toast about how proud he was of us and how our relationship was the future of the family. Everyone clapped and smiled, while I just stood there holding my drink, feeling like a prop. That night, I stayed up staring at the ceiling, wondering how I got here. I wasn't angry at Maya or even my parents. I was angry at myself for letting this get so far. I wanted out, but I didn't know how. I felt like leaving Maya wasn't just ending a relationship, it was letting down my family, her family, and everyone who'd been cheering us on. Looking back, I realize I should have spoken up sooner. But at the time, it felt impossible. I kept telling myself that maybe things would get better, that maybe I just needed to try harder. But deep down, I knew the truth. Maya and I weren't building a life together. We were building a facade. And I didn't know how much longer I could keep it up. I think the turning point for me was when I realized that being with Maya wasn't just tiring. It was draining in a way that felt impossible to overcome. The relationship had stopped being about two people figuring out life together and had become a constant performance. And the scary part was, I didn't even know when that shift had happened. It wasn't always bad, to be fair. Maya and I had moments where things felt normal, even fun, like when we'd sneak away from family events to grab burgers at this little diner downtown. It was one of the few times we could talk without anyone watching us, and for a while, it made me think that maybe we still had something worth holding on to. But those moments were rare. Most of the time, I felt like I was walking a tightrope, trying to balance what Maya wanted with what my parents expected. Maya wasn't a bad person or anything, but she had this knack for turning every situation into something that benefited her. If I mentioned feeling overwhelmed, she'd spin it by saying, "We're in this together, remember? If you're struggling, we'll figure it out, as long as we stay strong for each other." At first, that sounded supportive, but over time, I realized it was her way of keeping me in check. Staying strong for each other really meant, don't rock the boat because it'll make me look bad. I started noticing how calculated she was with everything. Every social media post, every dinner party, every time we attended some event together, it was all about appearances. She'd spend hours getting ready, not because she wanted to impress me, but because she wanted to impress the crowd. And if I wasn't matching her energy, it became a problem. We were at a charity gala once, and I wasn't feeling well, just tired from a long work week. I figured I could just coast through the night quietly, but Maya wouldn't have it. "Arjun, people are noticing you're not interacting," she hissed at me while we were near the buffet table. I was stunned. I wasn't being rude, just not bouncing around like I was running for mayor. She ended up carrying the conversation for the rest of the night, telling everyone how excited I was for our future plans. Plans I didn't even know about, by the way. I felt like I was watching my own life from the outside, with Maya narrating the script. Things got worse when my parents started weighing in. My mom would make little comments like, "Maya mentioned you seemed stressed lately. You should talk to her, she's very understanding." Or my dad would casually remark how important it was to keep your partner happy, as if I wasn't already bending over backwards to meet everyone's expectations. I felt like Maya and my parents were on the same team, and I was just tagging along. My sister, Prilla, wasn't much help either. She was firmly on Maya's side, constantly saying how great we were together and how she wished she had a relationship as solid as ours. Anytime I hinted at being unhappy, she brushed it off as me being dramatic. The thing is, I don't think Maya was trying to be manipulative on purpose. She genuinely bought into the idea of us as a power couple. In her mind, we were two ambitious people building something amazing together. But that wasn't the reality. I wasn't building anything. I was just following her lead, nodding along to whatever she created. I remember one night when we were out with her friends, another one of those double date things where everyone was trying to one-up each other with stories about work or vacations. Maya was in her element, laughing and telling some story about how we were planning a trip to Europe. I hadn't even heard of this supposed trip. When her friend asked me about it, I had to improvise some vague answer. Later, when I mentioned it to Maya, she brushed it off. "I was just thinking out loud," she said. "But wouldn't it be great if we did?" Everyone loved the idea. They think we're so adventurous. It wasn't about actually taking a trip, it was about the image of us as this jet-setting couple. As the months went by, I started feeling more disconnected. Maya didn't notice, or maybe she did, but she didn't care, as long as the performance continued. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Every day was a performance, whether it was for our families, her friends, or the business community. I started avoiding her when I could, not in an obvious way, but in small ways, working late, canceling plans last minute, or pretending to be too tired for long conversations. At first, I thought maybe I just needed some space to figure things out. But the more space I got, the more I realized how much better I felt without her constant presence. Even when we were together, I felt like we weren't really connecting. She'd be talking about some new business opportunity or a fancy event she wanted us to attend, and I'd just nod, barely paying attention. When I tried to talk about things that actually mattered to me, like how I was considering moving away from the family business, she'd either brush it off or steer the conversation back to something that interested her. One night, I told her I was thinking of taking some time off to travel alone and clear my head. She looked at me like I'd told her I wanted to move to Mars. "Why would you do that?" she asked, genuinely confused. "We're building a future together. You can't just leave and throw it all away." That's when it hit me. Maya didn't see me as a person with my own dreams and struggles. To her, I was just a piece of the puzzle, someone who fit into the life she wanted to create. And the scariest part was, I'd let her do it. I don't know exactly when the resentment started, but once it was there, I couldn't ignore it. Every time she talked about our future, I felt like screaming. It wasn't our future, it was hers, and I was just a supporting actor. At that point, if I thought things with Maya were tense before, nothing could have prepared me for what came next. I wasn't happy in the relationship, but I kept telling myself it wasn't the right time to end it. Between family pressure, business connections, and Maya's ability to make me feel guilty about everything, it was easier to push my feelings aside. That changed when Maya dropped a bomb I didn't see coming. It started on a random Tuesday afternoon. I'd just gotten home from work, tired and annoyed after a long day of meetings. I was planning to order takeout and zone out in front of the TV when I got a text from Prilla, my sister. The message just said, "Call me now." We talked a lot outside of family gatherings, so her urgency threw me off. I called her, half expecting her to need a favor or to be complaining about something trivial. Instead, she launched into a furious tirade the second I answered. "How could you do this to Maya?" she snapped, her voice thick with anger. Confused, I asked, "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about," she retorted. Maya showed me the messages. "I can't believe you betrayed her like this." Betrayed? Messages? None of it made sense. Priya was practically yelling, accusing me of being a liar and a cheater. I tried to interrupt her to figure out what was going on, but she wouldn't let me get a word in edgewise. She told me I was disgusting, selfish, and that I'd humiliated Maya and the entire family. Finally, I managed to ask, "What messages? What are you talking about?" That's when Priya explained. Apparently, Maya had shown her screenshots of text messages between me and another woman. According to these messages, I'd been calling this woman babe, talking about how we were sneaking around and making plans to meet up. Maya claimed she'd found these messages on my phone and had been devastated for weeks before deciding to confront Prilla about it. Hearing this, my stomach dropped. Not because I'd done anything wrong. I hadn't, but because I already knew that no one was going to believe me. Maya's lying, I said firmly. I never sent those messages. I don't even know who this woman is. Priya didn't believe me. So you're saying Maya made it all up, she said sarcastically. Why would she do that, Arjun? She loves you. She's been nothing but supportive, and this is how you treat her. The conversation ended with Prilla telling me she didn't even want to look at me and that she hoped I'd learn to be a better person. She hung up before I could respond. I sat there staring at my phone, trying to process what had just happened. The first thought that came to mind was how ridiculous the accusation was. I'd never cheated on Maya, hadn't even thought about it. The second thought was that Maya must have faked those messages. But why? The answer hit me like a ton of bricks. Maya knew I was pulling away. I'd been subtle about it, but she'd sensed it for a while, no matter how much I tried to hide it. This was her way of flipping the script. If I was the bad guy, she'd be the victim. It wouldn't just keep me in the relationship, it would also get my entire family on her side. In the following days, everything spiraled out of control. Maya had already gone to my parents with the screenshots, and by the time I tried to explain my side of the story, they weren't interested. We raised you better than this, my mom said during a phone call where she barely let me speak. Maya is devastated. She's done so much for you, and this is how you repay her. She wouldn't have made it up, my dad added. We've seen the messages. You need to take responsibility for your actions. It was like talking to a wall. No matter how much I insisted that the messages were fake, no one believed me. Maya had already painted the picture of the heartbroken girlfriend, and I was the cheating villain. The fallout was brutal. My parents called a family meeting, which was really an ambush. Maya was there, sitting next to my mom and crying softly while my dad laid into me. Do you know what you've done? He said. You've embarrassed the family. Do you have any idea how hard it's going to be to fix this? Every time I tried to defend myself, Maya would dab at a tear and say something like, I just don't understand why you would do this to me. It was like she'd rehearsed the whole thing. My parents ate it up, comforting her while they glared at me like I was the worst person in the world. What hurt me the most wasn't even Maya's betrayal, it was my family's reaction. They didn't even give me the benefit of the doubt. They didn't ask questions or try to understand. They simply accepted Maya's story and decided I wasn't worth defending. In less than a week, I was effectively disinherited. My dad told me they couldn't have someone like me tarnishing the family name and jeopardizing their relationship with Maya's family. It's best for everyone if you just stay away, he said. You need to sort out your priorities. I didn't know what stung more, the fact that my parents believed Maya's lies, or that they were willing to cut me off so easily. Things got even worse when the news reached the extended family. Suddenly, I was getting judgmental messages from cousins, aunts, and even family friends. People I barely knew were chiming in, calling me a cheater and a disgrace. One of my aunts posted something passive-aggressive on Facebook about how loyalty and honesty are the foundation of a family. She didn't mention me by name, but everyone knew who she was talking about. The only people who stayed by my side were a couple of close friends who kept reminding me that the truth would eventually come out. At that moment, though, it didn't feel like it would. The worst part was knowing that Maya was out there playing the victim while I was left to pick up the pieces. She hadn't just ruined our relationship, she'd completely destroyed my standing with my family. And the worst part is, being disinherited by your family isn't something you prepare for. There's no handbook titled, How to Rebuild Your Life, when everyone thinks you're garbage. For the first few weeks, I was in a haze. It felt like I'd been hit by a train, and now I was just wandering through the wreckage, trying to figure out which way was up. After the breakup with Maya and my family, I packed my things and left San Francisco. I didn't really have a plan, just a vague idea that I needed to be somewhere, anywhere else. I ended up in Austin, Texas, mainly because I'd visited once for a conference and remembered liking the vibe. It wasn't some spectacular move, but at least it was far enough away from the constant reminder of what I'd lost. The first few months were rough. I stayed in a cheap apartment on the outskirts of town, One of those places where the walls are thin and you can hear your neighbors yelling at each other over reality TV shows. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had some control over my life. First priority was getting a job. Back in San Francisco, I'd been working in the family business, managing operations for one of our resorts. Not exactly a skill set that screamed fresh start in a new city, but I had to make it work. I scoured job boards, sent out countless applications, and went to interviews that seemed designed to crush my soul. Eventually, I landed a job in software sales. It wasn't glamorous or exciting, but it paid the bills. The first day on the job, I walked into a beige office full of cubicles and fluorescent lights and thought, well, this is my life now. At first, I felt like a fish out of water. The work was repetitive, and I didn't know anyone in the office. My coworkers were polite but distant, and I spent most of my lunch breaks alone, scrolling through my phone and trying not to think about how much my life had changed. But slowly, things started to shift. One of my coworkers, Jake, noticed I always brought the same sad turkey sandwich for lunch and invited me to join him and a few others at a street taco truck. It became a weekly tradition, and over time, I found myself relaxing around them. The work itself wasn't my passion, but it gave me something I desperately needed: structure. I threw myself into it, determined to prove to myself that I could make it on my own. I worked long hours, learned everything I could about the industry, and started building a reputation as someone who could close deals. Outside of work, I was trying to figure out who I was without the weight of my family's expectations. Back in San Francisco, everything I did seemed to have to serve some greater purpose, whether it was for the family business or for our image. But in Austin, no one cared about my last name or what I used to do. I could just be Arjun, this random guy trying to make a life for himself. I started exploring the city on the weekends, checking out live music, food trucks, and hiking trails. It's not like I was thriving exactly, but I was surviving. And for a while, that was enough. About a year after starting my new life, something unexpected happened. I'd been working late one night, trying to finish up a big presentation, when one of my coworkers mentioned that a friend of his was looking for someone to help optimize data systems for his small business. It wasn't a field I had much experience in, but I figured, why not? That small gig turned into something much bigger. I realized I had a knack for consulting, helping businesses streamline their operations and improve efficiency. The work was challenging but rewarding, and it felt good to be using my skills in a way that didn't involve meeting my family's expectations. Over the next 2 years, I built a side consulting business that eventually became my full-time job. I focused on working with small to medium-sized businesses, and before I knew it, I was making more money than I ever had working for my family. In the middle of all this, I met Hannah. She was a graphic designer I'd hired for one of my clients, and from the moment we met, there was something different about her. She wasn't flashy or overly polished like Maya. She was warm, creative, and had this dry sense of humor that caught me off guard in the best way. We started out as friends, grabbing coffee after meetings and talking about everything from work to our favorite childhood cartoons. It wasn't long before those coffee dates turned into something more. Being with Hannah felt easy in a way I didn't know was possible. She didn't care about appearances or status. She cared about me, plain and simple. By year 3 in Austin, I was thriving. I had a successful business, a supportive partner, and a life that felt entirely my own. One thing I learned during this time was how to let go of the resentment. Don't get me wrong, I was still angry about what Maya did and how my family handled everything. But holding on to that anger wasn't serving me. The more I focused on building my new life, the less I cared about the people who'd let me down. It's funny how much can change when you're forced to start over. If you'd told me 4 years ago that I'd be living in Austin, running my own business, and engaged to someone like Hannah, I wouldn't have believed you. But here I was, proving to myself that I didn't need my family's approval or their money to succeed. Starting over wasn't easy, and there were plenty of nights where I felt like giving up. but the outcome was worth it. Then one afternoon, out of the blue, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I would have ignored calls like that, but something made me answer. It was Prilla, my sister. We hadn't spoken in years, not since she accused me of being the worst human being on earth for those fake messages about my supposed infidelity. Hearing her voice felt strange, like opening a door to a room I'd sealed off years ago. "Hello," I said, keeping my tone neutral. I wasn't going to roll out the red carpet after everything that had happened. She didn't waste time with small talk. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice shaky. "About Maya." It was a name I hadn't heard in a while, and honestly, I was fine with that. But something in Prilla's tone made me pause. She sounded nervous, guilty. I couldn't quite place it. "What about her?" I asked. Prilla hesitated before blurting it out. She lied. About everything. I didn't say anything at first. Just let the word hang there, waiting for her to explain. Turns out, one of Maya's close friends, a woman named Alina, had recently reached out to Prilla with some sort of confession. Alina had discovered that Maya had fabricated the entire infidelity scandal. She hadn't just doctored images of messages, she'd staged fake conversations with a burner phone to back up her story. Alina had known about it for years, but had kept quiet because she didn't want to get involved. I guess her conscience finally caught up with her. When Priya finished explaining, there was a long silence on the line. I didn't know what to say. On one hand, I wasn't surprised. I'd always known the truth. But hearing it confirmed like this, from someone who'd been completely against me, was somehow satisfying. Prilla's voice cracked as she said, "I am so sorry, Arjun. I didn't know. I didn't want to believe you, but I should have. I should have given you the benefit of the doubt." I didn't respond immediately. I didn't even know what to say. Finally, I said, "I know. I can't undo what happened," Prilla said, her tone desperate. "But I needed to tell you the truth. You deserve to know." I wasn't sure I deserved anything from her at that point. It was hard to feel grateful when the truth had arrived years too late. The damage was already done. Later that night, I told Hannah about the call. She listened quietly, her face a mix of empathy and frustration. "Do you think they'll actually do anything about it?" she asked. I shook my head. Probably not. My family isn't exactly good at admitting they were wrong and I was right. In the following weeks, I didn't hear a word from my parents. Priya had clearly told them what Maya had done. She hinted as much in a follow-up text, but they didn't reach out to me. Not an apology, not an acknowledgement, nothing. It was like they didn't know how to handle the truth now that it was out in the open. Instead of owning their mistakes, they chose to sweep it under the rug, pretending it had never happened. At first, I was furious. How could they just say nothing after everything that had happened? But over time, my anger morphed into something else, clarity. Their silence spoke volumes. It confirmed what I'd always suspected. They cared more about appearances, about their relationship with Maya's family, than they cared about me. The truth didn't magically fix anything. It didn't repair the years of damage or erase the betrayal I'd felt. If anything, it only highlighted how deep the cracks in my family really were. But it also gave me a strange sense of closure. I decided not to wait for an apology that would never come. Instead, I focused on the life I'd built in Austin. Their betrayal was awful, but it had also forced me to grow in ways I never would have otherwise. It pushed me to get out of the bubble I'd been living in and discover who I really was. Would I have chosen that path if I'd had a choice? Probably not. But sometimes life doesn't give you choices. It just shoves you in a direction and forces you to deal with it. I haven't spoken to Maya since it all went down, and honestly, I have no interest in doing so. She's just a chapter in my story, one I'm glad to have left behind. My family remained where I'd left them, silent and distant. No apologies, no olive branches, just a lot of silence. Then, one day, I got an email from Prilla. The subject line read, "Aaron's wedding invitation." Aaron is my younger brother. He and I were never super close, but we got along well enough growing up. He was always the quiet, compliant one, which made him my parents' golden child after I was disinherited. Reading that subject line, I wasn't sure what to expect. I opened the email, and it was strangely casual. Prilla wrote something like, "Hey, hope you're doing well. I know it's been a while, but Aaron's getting married in a couple of months, and we'd love for you to be there. Attached is the invitation. Let me know if you can make it." That was it. Just a bland invitation, as if I were some distant cousin they hadn't seen since a random family reunion. What struck me the most was that Aaron hadn't reached out himself. It was his wedding, after all. If he really wanted me there, why couldn't he take 2 minutes to call me or send me a text? Instead, he sent Prilla as his messenger, like it was a chore he couldn't be bothered with. At first, I didn't respond. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to, but the more I thought about it, the more irritated I got. After everything that had happened, being disinherited, falsely accused, and completely ignored, they just expected me to show up as if nothing had happened? A week later, I got a follow-up email from Prilla. This one was less casual and more emotional. She said it would mean a lot to the family if I came, that Aaron wanted me there but didn't know how to ask me, and that this could be a chance to move forward. That phrase, "move forward," really set me off. It's like my family had adopted it as a mantra to avoid accountability. Whenever they didn't want to deal with the past, they'd throw those words around. It wasn't about healing or making amends, it was about saving face. I didn't respond to the second email, either. Not long after, my dad called. Seeing his name on my phone screen was surreal. I hadn't heard from him since he told me to stay away because I was embarrassing the family. Against my better judgment, I answered, curious what he'd say. "Arjun," he said, his tone gruff, but not hostile. "Prilla mentioned you haven't responded about Aaron's wedding. We'd really like you to come." He continued, "It's important for the family image to be together, and Aaron wants his brother there on his big day." I couldn't help but laugh. If Aaron wants me there so badly, why hasn't he called me himself? I asked. There was a pause on the other end. "You know how he is," my dad said dismissively. "He's not good with words." "That's funny," I said, my tone sharper than I intended, because he seemed to have plenty of words when he cut me off, along with the rest of you. My dad sighed, as if I were the difficult one. "That was a long time ago, Arjun. Mistakes were made, but it's time to move on." There it was again. Move on. I felt my chest tighten with frustration. "You didn't just believe Maya's lies," I said, "you completely cut me off. And when the truth came out, you didn't even bother to apologize. You can't just call me now and expect everything to be okay because it's convenient for you." He was about to respond, but I cut him off. "You made it clear a long time ago where I stand in this family. Aaron's wedding doesn't change that." I hung up before he could respond. In the weeks that followed, the pressure mounted. Prilla sent more emails, each one guiltier than the last. Even the extended family got involved. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years messaged me on social media, telling me I was being selfish and that I needed to let go of the past. One of my aunts called me, saying I was breaking my mother's heart by refusing to go. Things quieted down for a while, too much silence. At first, I thought they'd finally accepted my decision. But I should have known better. This wasn't about me or my feelings, it was about the family's reputation. They weren't giving up, they were just regrouping. A week or so later, my mom called. I almost didn't answer. As soon as I said hello, she launched into an emotional tirade. "Arjun, I don't understand why you're being so heartless," she said, her voice trembling. "This is Aaron's big day. Don't you think he deserves to have his whole family there?" Her tone was so dramatic, it was like I was single-handedly ruining the wedding. I stayed calm and told her the same thing I'd been repeating. This isn't about Aaron. It's about how I was treated, and no one has even tried to make amends. She sobbed loudly, as if to guilt me. "Anyone can make mistakes," she said. "We can't just dwell on the past." I've already moved on, I replied firmly. But that doesn't mean I'm going to forget how I was treated. Now, years later, you expect me to show up for the sake of appearances? I'm not going to do it. I've built a life for myself, and I'm happy. I'm not going to pretend everything is fine just because it's convenient for you. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, in a softer voice, she said, "You don't understand how hard this has been for me, Arjun. I just want my family to be whole again." That sentence stung more than I expected. This wasn't about me, it was about her and her need to maintain the family image. If she'd really wanted to fix things, she would have reached out years ago, or when the truth about Maya came out, not now, when they needed me to play the role of the good son. "I'm sorry this has been hard for you," I said, my voice firm, "but it's been hard for me too. And unlike you, I had to go through it alone." She didn't have a response to that, and I ended the call shortly after. A few days later, I got another call, this time from Prilla. I almost didn't answer, but figured it was better to just rip off the band-aid and face whatever she had to say. "Are you really not coming to the wedding?" she asked, skipping the pleasantries. "No, I'm not," I said bluntly. She sighed heavily, like she was carrying the weight of the world. "Do you know how awkward it's going to be if you're not there? People will ask questions. They'll notice. And that's supposed to be my problem?" I replied, "Maybe if all of you had treated me with an ounce of respect, we wouldn't be having this conversation." After that, I blocked Prilla's number. I didn't want to deal with any more calls or guilt trips. The wedding came and went without me, and honestly, it felt good. Hannah and I spent the day hiking on a nearby trail, then gorged ourselves at our favorite barbecue joint. It was peaceful, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the weight of my family's expectations crushing me. Part of me expected another round of guilt trips after the wedding, but it never came. Maybe they finally realized I wasn't going to budge, or maybe they just didn't have the energy to keep pushing. Either way, the silence was a relief. Walking away wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And the more distance I put between my family and me, the clearer things became. Hannah has been my rock through all of this. She reminds me that it's okay to set boundaries, even with people who share your DNA. At the end of the day, I've learned that family isn't about blood. It's about the people who are there for you, who have your back no matter what. And for me, that's Hannah, my friends, and the life I've built in Austin. So no, I didn't go to Aaron's wedding. I don't feel bad about it, and I don't regret my decision. My family made their choice a long time ago, and now I've made mine.